at Politics and Prose, and I have the honor of being your host today. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this virtual format, which allows us to continue to bring these amazing authors and their epic books to readers like you. I'm so excited to welcome our very special guests this evening, Somaiya, Daud, along with Veronica Roth and Courtney Summers. Before we begin, just a few things. You can click on the link we're about to drop in the chat box to get your own copies of their book, including Somaiya's newest book in the Mirage series, Court of Lions. I see Veronica also has one too. So you guys have to get out and get your own copy. They're going to have signed book plates with them while supplies last, as well as you can also use the link to get copies of Veronica and Courtney's amazing books as well. Also, if you have a question for our guests, you can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there, right down there. You can also vote on the questions that you really want answered, as well as we always like to remember that this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that friends be respectful of one another in their questions and comments. And thank you all so much for being here this evening. So now let's go on to the event you're all waiting for. It is my honor to welcome back virtually author, teacher, and former PMP children and teen bookseller, Somaiya Daud. Somaiya recently received her PhD from the University of Washington. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And in addition to writing her beautifully epic debut novel, Mirage, she's also contributed to several anthologies, including Our Stories, Our Voices, and A Phoenix First Must Burn. And tonight we are celebrating the release of her newest book in the Mirage duology, Court of Lions. Yay! This beautifully blending science fiction and fantasy, the novel continues Amani and Maram's story of love, faith, political intrigue, and cultural identity. It's amazing. If you haven't read Mirage yet, you gotta get on it. And tonight, she'll be joined by our two special guests. First, Veronica Roth. Hi. She's the author of best-selling Divergent series, the cosmically epic Carve the Mark duology, and her newest book, Chosen Ones. She has also written many short stories, including her collection, The End and Other Beginnings. And finally, we have Courtney Summers, critically acclaimed author of numerous darkly thrilling YA novels, including All the Rage, Sadie, and her upcoming novel, The Project. Her work has also received numerous honors, including the Edgar Award, the John Spray Award, and the Odyssey Award. Now, it is my pleasure to pass over the mic to these amazing authors, Somaiya, Veronica, and Courtney. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having us. Is my mic better now?
Yes,
yeah, you're great.
Fabulous. Okay.
that was a good intro.
It was.
Yeah, I just said A like a Canadian.
You did it, I missed it.
Everyone will know now.
I wish I had I should have gotten my maple syrup like next to me for whenever you sound Canadian.
I would be offended.
I would love that. That would have been so fun.
Yes, you would. I know you would. You're evil like that.
That's not true.
So we're here to celebrate you, Somaiya.
Yeah. How do we start?
Well, I told my Instagram followers that I would take you to task for the emotional crimes that you committed against me.
I'm for it. Do it.
So
I find that really interesting because I don't think that I committed emotional crimes. Like, I think of the three of us, I'm the least emotionally criminal.
you know what? That's true.
No.
But you made me feel things a lot. So that's the crime that I'm referring to.
This is the time to make things hard and uncomfortable. You have to answer for what you've done to us.
Okay, so I want to know what I did to you.
You made me upset, emotionally invested. It made me feel like...
Okay, making you emotionally invested is not a crime. That's my job.
I didn't ask for that, though.
Okay, maybe we should start by talking about Maram, because...
Oh, yes.
I just want to ask you about, I kind of know this from the background, but I would like you to tell everyone why Maram has a bigger role in this book and how that worked for you and what you enjoyed about it.
So, funnily enough, in the original conception of Mirage, Maram dies. I don't know. Have I told you guys this? Yeah. So in the original one, yeah.
Wow.
So in the original Mirage, she was slated for death because she's a character who doesn't really change or she does change in the first one. But my original conception of her is that she's so angry and is so unwilling to take control of her anger, that she confronts Mathis about something that the readers actually don't find out about until the second book. And because he has a spare, he kills her. That was the original conception. Yeah, and so I was like, okay, and my original editors all begged me to not kill her because they all loved her so much. And I was like, okay, if I don't kill her off, then she can't do what she did in the first book. Like, she can't just sort of be the menacing evil princess.
Like her to refuse to die, though. It's just
yeah, right. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is very like her to refuse to die. And so I was like, okay, these are the pieces that we have of her. And so like Mirage went through a lot of revisions. And once I was like, okay, she's not going to die, then all of the pieces that had been there in terms of like her connection with her mother and her connection with Amani then needed more attention. And so I sort of finessed those. And then in the second book, I was like, she's alive. She's made this she's made this connection with Amani, and that connection has been disrupted by like this perceived betrayal. But like, this is also a path that she would want to continue on. And that like, it's sort of like when you see something for the first time, you can't go back to pretending that it doesn't exist. And so for Maram, I was like, she can't go back to pretending that it doesn't exist, that like these problems and her connection with her mother and her connection with Amani and her connection to the planet don't exist, but also she's so closed off from everyone. I thought that it would be really hard to bring that to its natural conclusion without allowing her the space in the story to be able, for readers to be able to understand what was going on and how difficult the decisions that she was making were. How difficult her own personal grappling with identity was. Like, there's a moment in Court of Lions where Amani as Maram is told that like one of the cousins expected her to seem less Kushala than she actually is, and Amani feels uncomfortable taking on the like ethnic biracial difficulties that Maram has, but it's her job as an actress and as a body double. And I thought that like that's a really good metaphor for like, I felt like it would be really dishonest to allow the reader to continue to interact with Maram's like identity issues only through Amani, who is like monoracial and has completely different problems in terms of like interacting with the colonial structure and interacting with violence and identity. Right? Like, her issues are not identity. And so to ape that through Amani felt literarily dishonest. So she needed to have her own chapters.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm into it. No, I mean, I think it's easy if you read Mirage and you kind of read it a little faster on the surface to think of Maram as like not, I don't know,
as a spoiled princess.
Yeah, it's not like, but she is really dealing with a lot of complex and difficult stuff. So I was really happy to hear more about her and about her. Like, she feels like she can't even connect to this one half of her because she's like not allowed. Right. They don't like her, or she's.
Well, I think it's like, it's a really terrible way to grow up, to understand that you are a compromise, and that you're like the product of a war crime. And I think that like people don't approach her that way, but like Maram is the product of a war crime.
Yes, I'm getting upset. We're all over it.
That's such an awful burden to have to carry as a child. And you grow up among people who will always think of you as less. Either they think of you as lesser because you're not pure, you're not high Vathek, you're not pure blooded, or you're evidence of genocide. That sucks.
See, this is what we're talking about when we talk about the crimes.
What did I do? She asked us earlier.
I did nothing.
This is the worst.
I just wrote about the truth. Like, really, honestly, I'm more of a journalist, so it's not my fault. I try not to talk about my students, but I also get this problem from students where like they talk about history and fiction like they're the same thing.
No.
It's deeply frustrating. I don't know what to do with it. And I've now contributed to the problem by referring to myself as a journalist.
Oh boy. Well, I continue to have questions. Should I just keep firing them at you?
Sure.
Yeah, I would love for you to get into the court politics stuff, because I don't know, like the complexity of the kind of political stuff that's happening in Court of Lions like really ramps up. And that's one thing that I loved, because I mean, I know from knowing you that you are into this part of the Star Wars prequels where
Yeah.
you get to talk to the Galactic Senate and wear fancy dresses. And but I also know how challenging it is to kind of keep track of that sort of thing when you're writing. And like, how did you figure out where all the different factions were gonna kind of come from? Oh my God, I just used the word faction.
That's what they're called, though.
I know. Just feel like I'm not allowed. That word has been forbidden from my life.
That's what they're called.
Anyway, court politics.
So basically, when I first started writing Mirage, I did this like super ugly world map that the designer for the Mirage map looked at and was like, I can't use this. Like, I think it was literally like, he couldn't decipher what was going on this map. Anyway, so I had this horrible map. And then I had like, I basically was like, here are the most powerful houses. These are the like, their realms of influence, right? Because most of the main continent, Onondaga is the desert. So like they're built around, so like all of the imperial cities and all of the like trade centers and whatnot are either coastal or built around oases. And then I had to like decide, okay, so who rules what, and then also like which characters come from which part of the planet, and who collaborated with the regime during the conquest and who resisted. So like, who are the people who stood with the Salihis, oh my God, with the Salihis during the purge, and who are the ones who collaborated with the regime, right? Or with the Vath. And so from there, then it was just like, okay, who are the smaller houses that pay fealty to whichever families? And like, I'm using houses, even though like in like Arab medieval history, which is what I draw on really heavily for like the court structure, in which like North African courts were also modeled after because of the Arab conquest and all of this stuff, but really they're tribes. So like the Salih, and it's like really, I think it was something that like, when I was talking to my original editors, it was just like something that I did not understand, because you had like tribes that are also like, for Amaziris and for Arabs, like the tribe is the family, right? So when you're like, I'm from this tribe, like they're all your cousins and they're huge, right? And so you have all of these tribes, and then you have smaller families that like pay fealty to these tribes. And that's something that I made up because I like the idea of fealty houses. Anyway, so I had this like, I have a codex, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, like how
watched
big
a
is the
single
world building document?
So I'm writing a novella, and I was reading another book, and I was like, this is going to be like my novella where I don't have to do world building and I don't have to think about politics. And then I was like, psych.
You
I don't
love
think you
it.
can.
No, I don't think that you can, but I was really like, oh, it's romance first. Like
Oh no. I think you can. One can, but you cannot.
Oh yeah.
Specific to you thing.
I was like, oh crap, I don't actually know anything about like the politics of this world, and I think that that's probably an impediment and why it's so hard to outline. Whatever, man. I wish that's not how I thought. Anyway, so I have this like big map, and so, or like this big like file where I track all of this stuff, and so like where everyone is, what their sigils are, what their position was before the conquest and after the conquest, and then after that, I start thinking about like the individual. So who is the individual player from this house that's going to appear in the court, and what are their individual desires? Because I think when I first started thinking about court politics, like long before I wrote Court of Lions, it was really intimidating to me because I thought of it as like chess, and I can't play chess. I can only play checkers. Checkers is really easy, right? Chess might be easy, but I'm so intimidated by it that I'm sort of like, I can't play chess.
That whole think 2 moves ahead thing, like, how?
Yeah. So like, yeah. So there's a scene. So there's like a couple of scenes where like Idris is doing chess, and I like literally am like, he's like, oh, it's like a problem you have to solve or whatever, and I'm like, you're right, it is. And then it's like he took her side of the board, and that's it. You will notice there are no specifics about any of the chess matches that they play. It's all very, very like he took her side of the board, because I don't actually know.
Chess is hard too, but like doing this whole world building thing is just like comes together in pieces. but not chess.
Because
It's scary.
because I think of court politics not as chess. This is what the metaphor, sorry, this is what I was trying to say, is that I don't think of it as chess, I think of it as relationships. So like instead of thinking about characters thinking like 2 moves ahead in order to like defeat their enemies, I'm like, what is their very basic desire, and how does that come into conflict with everyone else's desires, with what they want? And that to me is a much easier way to sort of map out what moves they're gonna make. Because like in the beginning I was really scared of like, how am I gonna make like her do these schemes? I don't know schemes. And it was like, okay, what does she want? And how are other people gonna prevent her from getting her what she wants? And then multiply that for like all of the members that can have like a material effect on any plan that she makes. It's really like...
Courtney, I love that you're just pretending like you could never think on this complex a scale, but
yeah,
there's a lot of complexity in your book, so
yeah.
I want to hear from you.
No, I'm just like, wow, it's so much easier to write murders. Like,
Not.
problem, you just kill them. That's it.
I want everyone.
That's a viable way in court politics. Sometimes you just kill off someone.
It's true. I want everyone in the chat to know that earlier I had to brainstorm a plot development, and I realized that the book I'm trying to plot is like more like plotting a contemporary. This book may never exist, by the way. It's not contemporary, obviously, but it felt more like it, and I realized just how incredibly difficult it is what Courtney does. So it's like, how do you deal with it when it's just all these people interacting? And
I was following along with this conversation and was like, wow, I'm no help here, because I'm like, where's the like synthetic conspiracy? Where are the cyborgs?
I know, if there's
that's
not
how you do conflict
or space travel, then what happens?
I knew my books lacked something. It's cyborgs, wasn't it? Oh
yes.
I think we know what happened to Sadie.
She became a cyborg. Oh my god, I love this for her. I would love if she became... Can you write a sequel where it's like Sadie, but it's like S:83?
Oh my god, I want this so badly.
Yeah.
Only for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's reparations for the project.
How dare you? Question. Continue.
Oh,
how does it feel to have completed a duology? Like, that's a lot of work, and you got your PhD in the meantime. It's like, I always say about she's constantly productivity shaming us. She's like doing 10 things at once at all times, and then completing them, which is the meanest part about it.
I think that because I was doing so much that I can't like fully appreciate it. Like, people will be like, congrats on your PhD, and I'm like, oh right.
This is tragedy, the artist's tragedy. Sad.
Huh?
I said this is like a tragedy. You completed.
Yeah, it is. I'm so overworked. I can't appreciate my own accomplishments.
Oh, well,
God.
it's got a little real here.
This has turned into a therapy session.
R.I.P.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
So,
But you were asking about the dual. Do you feel like?
Oh, yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about.
you didn't know the first one until we told her.
It feels really like, I don't know. I'm really proud of the books, but finishing the duology doesn't feel like anything.
Fair enough. I get it.
It really, I don't know. I think part of it is because it's been done for such a long time. Like long before anyone has read it. Like when I actually finished it, I was really, really emotional, and I felt like I had done a good send-off, which I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able to do. And I set them up in a way that felt like a beginning, like a new beginning, instead of an ending. Like, I want readers to wonder what they're going to do after this book. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about translation a little bit? Because I feel like that was such a huge feat here. I know obviously you did it for Mirage also, but I think it was particularly difficult for Court of Lions, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was particularly difficult for Court of Lions because I decided to pick Antara ibn Shaddad, which, like, if anyone in the audience is familiar with Arab poets, Antara ibn Shaddad is a pre-Islamic Bedouin poet, and he's sort of like like a great example is like my mom was watching the Arab version of X Factor, and like one of the contestants was like an 8-year-old girl who spoke like perfect classical Arabic, and the thing she decided to sing was like one of Antara's poems. Yeah, so he's like you say, like when I told my mom I was translating Antara, she was like, ooh, Antara. You know, like he just has like that weight in the Arabic poetic canon, right?
She's
so
like,
I was like,
was she like, why are you doing this to me? Because your mom helped you with the translation, right?
Yeah, okay, so during the translation process, she was like, why is this the poem that you picked? Because I picked one that like no one had written anything about. Right? Because I don't know anything. I'm not an Arabist, right? Like I talk a lot about translation, but I'm unfortunately a Victorianist, and so I have this collection of poetry by Antara called War Songs, and I was just flipping through it, and I picked one that I thought was like emotional, and that was emotionally resonant to the scene that it appears, right? Not knowing that like I had picked one that no one had written about, and that was going to be impossible to translate, and that like, you know, really like the smart thing to do would have been to replace it once I figured out the problem. And I was like, no, it's so perfect for the scene, especially because there's like a weird falconry analogy, and the person who recites the poem is Ahraz, who is a falconer. But so I picked this like national poet that's like enshrined in the Arab literary consciousness, because hubris is really like I was like, oh, I've translated these like lovely 2-line poems, you know, that are really saucy, and I you know, I've got a handle on it now. And it took me like 2 days to translate Antara with help, and it's like an 8-line poem.
You have a video
not even that long.
You have a video about how you went through the translation process, right? It's at
and it's on Flatiron's IGTV, and it's like what's the word that I'm looking for? The video is like an hour long. It's like 45 minutes, and I only do 2 lines.
Oh boy,
it's so good though.
I love that video.
It was fun to do. It was fun to walk people through the process, because it's really about like figuring out what the words mean, and then trying to figure out a way to translate it in a way that like keeps the spirit of the poem intact, and that keeps the poem itself, like not just the spirit, but like what does the poem mean, and how do I render that poetically to an audience. And in some ways, the fact that it's appearing in Court of Lions is both a blessing and a curse, because I don't have to worry about like there are all of these nuances in it that matter when you're reading him as Antara within the pre-Islamic Arabic poetic canon, but like most readers of Court of Lions have never heard of Antara. Yeah. So like I was freed in some ways of like not having, but then also if they had heard of Antara, maybe my translation job would have been easier, because I could rely on the knowledge to fill in the gaps. So.
When have you ever taken the easier path?
I know!
You just don't. You refuse.
It's because like, I'm a masochist.
You are. I'm fine with that. It was hard. It's what I deserve for having to go through what you put me through. It's my revenge.
You know, like I just feel like you're really lucky I didn't get to do a third one, because we've discussed what I would have done.
She told me some things.
So in terms of like the scale of devastation,
she was like, I
didn't get too
upset. I know.
If I could have, this is how I would have done it, and the mere act of telling me upset me. You were so satisfied that day.
It really was.
I realized at the beginning of this conversation that the real emotional crimes I was talking about were just you sharing information about other things that you had planned.
There was someone who was going to die, and I had like watched all of my friends love this character, and the whole time I was like, have you seen the Chuck E. Cheese meme where like Chuck E. Cheese is like that was me every time someone says something, they were like, oh, and then you know, like it ended up that it was a duology, and I was like, well, that character was saved.
That was
like God intervened on you all's behalf.
Yeah, so that should tell you something, shouldn't it? On our side.
I don't want to interrupt, but I think it's time for us to move to the Q&A. And
okay.
I don't want to like make myself the moderator here, but I like Zoom, so.
Hi, Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Hi.
I guess that's my cue. So I think we're going to move in then into our Q&A portion. You can still add questions down below.
Ooh, so there was one that was dismissed that I saw pop up, and I really want to talk about it. Is it okay if I bring that up?
Was that the one who would win?
Who would win in a fight between among the three of us?
Oh, that's not fair.
The reason I want to talk about it is because it's very clear I would win in a fight. I just want to say.
Obviously.
That's right.
I'm about a foot taller than all these women.
Yeah, okay, also for context, like, both of them do hardcore workouts, and it's like a miracle if I manage to get 3 days of yoga in during the week. So this is also not a fair question, because I would recuse myself from the fight. Like, you know that gif of the raccoon running away from the cats? That's me in this scenario.
Yeah, but I don't know. You're scrappy.
You'd make some devastating, disturbing meme and terrify us all into submission with whatever you found on the internet that day.
Oh, one of my milk memes?
Yeah, it's
I don't want to talk about that.
I have to inflict this on the audience. So there's a post on Tumblr from that blog, Today I Learned, and it was one about John Milton where it's basically like, so he was blind for like almost the entire transcription of Paradise Lost, and he had this assistant who transcribed his whole thing for him. And so like on the mornings when his assistant was late, he would complain, "I want to be milked," the milk being his creative juices. And I just thought this was so funny. It was like the funniest thing I'd ever read. The funniest thing I've ever read.
That's bad. And you should.
All right, let's do the real Q&A now.
Anyway, I guess I'll segue into our next question.
Where do you go from here?
I know. Well, our next one is from Jeremy, and Jeremy asks, well, first says, congrats on your new book, Somaiya.
Thank you.
And for any of you, out of all your books, which character would you say most mirrors you?
Oh. Ooh. Well, that's an easy one for me, but I'll let you guys go first.
Tell us.
Yeah, I think you should start. You have an answer.
Yeah.
It's Maram, yeah. I really love Amani, but I'm not as nice as her.
No.
Maram and I both tend to our grudges really well, so.
I can't imagine you ever actually slapping someone across the face, though. So,
when I was younger, this is the thing that always surprises people. When I was I don't know if I should tell the story, actually.
Think about it.
I've gotten into fights when I was much younger. I'm a lady now, but when I was much younger, I had a lot of anger issues. So it's not completely out of the realm.
I want to tell you that when I was in kindergarten, I slapped a girl across the face. Her name was Allison. I don't remember why. I don't think there was a reason. And that was the only time I ever got time out in kindergarten. I think I just hit her, and then I realized afterward, like, oh, that's what violence is. You know, like when you're a kid and you don't understand.
And now she's like, I definitely win a fight against you guys. She was so sure.
The natural evolution of that moment for you.
Now it's a verbiage makes complete sense.
Courtney, do you have a character that mirrors you the most?
The good ones that are coolest. I don't know.
I have a different answer for that. Veronica. But no one's met this character, so
they're all terrible. Why would I admit to anything like that?
For me, no, all mine are like tougher than I am. But maybe maybe I'd be like one of the dudes, because they usually have like a main dude and like a main gal. Yes, I'm predictable that way. And so maybe like Akos and Cardinal.
So you could beat us up, but you couldn't beat up one of your characters.
No, and also like I could never beat you guys up because I'm actually like a very gentle person.
And I would be so Somaiya would step out of the fight. You'd actually refuse, but I would fight you both and win. So
yeah, maybe you would win.
I think again is like proof of the scale of emotional crimes committed. Like I feel like this is correlated to that.
Yeah.
Both of us are like, we don't want to do this, and you're like, no, we're gonna do this.
We're gonna fight.
Yeah, it's on the table now. You can't just walk away from a fight. Your honor's on the line.
The Chekhov gun of Courtney Summers' life.
Well, I think we're gonna take another question if that's okay. So our next question is from Nicole. Nicole also says for Somaiya, congratulations on your awesome book.
Thank you.
And the question is, what was your favorite thing to research when writing Mirage and Court of Lions?
Ooh, my favorite thing to research was just like North African and Islamic medieval like court history, because one of the things that I really, really wanted, and that I knew sort of on like a surface level, but that the research really revealed to me, is that like the Arab and like Arabic speaking court pole scene, or like courtier scene or whatever, was very, very different than the European one. Like it revolved, like the power, where power was derived from was different, and the ways in which people interacted with one another and the things that they privileged were different. Like one of the things to me that was like super important is that like Europe had a feudal serf system, because they had all this farmland, and like a lot of North Africa and the Middle East is desert. You can't derive power from an army of serfs. If like you can't have a landed barony if everything that you would own is sand. That's not monetarily useful. And so I wanted, so it was really fun to read about that, and also really fun to just read about like harem politics, because obviously in the West we have a very particular idea about like what the harem is, which is like a very sexy, like sort of exotified, glorified brothel, and like the politics that the women got into and the negotiations that they had to make, and the sort of agency that they exerted in those spaces was fascinating to me. And obviously it never shows up in Mirage and Court of Lions because there is no harem, but it was really useful to me to like be thinking explicitly about how like women are able to exert agency over their own lives, even in spaces that are like deliberately trying to disenfranchise them, which is something, it's not something necessarily that I think gets lost in these conversations, but oftentimes I find with, when talking about this stuff, the only sort of form of womanhood that readers will accept when it's a woman of color is like she has to take on, she has to engage in the patriarchy, like she has to be like a woman king or something like that. And I really instead wanted to think about like, imagine an all-woman space. What do the relationships look like, and how do they engage in power and maneuvering and all of this other stuff? And that really shaped how I thought about all of the women in Mirage and how they dealt with each other. The men really take a back seat for this reason.
They do. I was rereading Mirage. I was just going to say, I was rereading Mirage and I realized that it's like Idris and Mathis, and that's it. Just all women. Yeah.
There are a couple more men in Court of Lions. There's Imad and Tariq, but they're both sort of like take a seat in comparison to their sisters. Like the people that they pay attention, like the people that Amani is talking to are Atimad, Imad's twin sister, and Khulud, Tariq's older sister. And they're much more important. And Idris goes off and just like he's playing with his horses with these boys, and the women are doing all of the maneuvering. And so like the research that I did, like I read a lot about Roxalina, who was the first like legal wife of an Ottoman sultan in Turkey during the Ottoman Empire. And I did a lot of reading. Ibn Asai has a collection titled Consorts of the Khulafa. So a lot of reading about slave girls who rose to power through their relationships with caliphs and sultans in the Abbasid Sultanate and that sort of thing. Or the Abbasid Khilafah, I guess, not a sultanate.
Thank you so much for sharing. Does Veronica or Courtney, did you want to share anything else in researching your books as well?
Oh, yeah. Courtney, do you have research discussion to have?
My researching is so very real world based, and it's not often, I don't know. I was just thinking how like you guys have such great like research based stories and what you delve into, and I just think about the time that my editor was like, you have to put Sadie in a real state. So I was like, okay, it's gonna be Colorado. and then I was like, it fits, like we talked about it fits. But then I said something like Colorado is, what did I say? It was like 1,000 miles wide. I got the size completely wrong, and that was all I heard about for like the longest time. And I was, why did I share that story? Most memorable, honestly. It was like the one time I tried to do anything.
I feel like you read like 5 books to prepare for the project, but maybe
oh
you're
yeah,
not
I did, I guess.
talk about that yet.
Fun. I don't equate research with fun. That's why we write such different things.
Oh boy.
I don't know. I'm not making a case for myself here, but doesn't matter. Somaiya's on trial.
As far as my research goes, I built an alternate history for Chosen Ones. So I don't want to spoil anything, so I guess I'll talk around it. So I made an alternate history for the world, but specifically for Chicago, in which like magic had proliferated, you know, this world. And doing that research, I mean, that was like the bigger research arc that I was in, but the most interesting thing was researching Project MK Ultra, which was our government's experiments using LSD in like the 60s and 70s and other times also. But I read like a lot of declassified documents discussing that, and just like the stuff that happened. I mean, it's really like horrible and difficult to read about in certain ways, but it's fascinating what our government like gets up to that we now know about, and I'm sure we're getting up to weird stuff now too. But doing that research was probably the biggest undertaking for Chosen Ones and the most interesting.
Okay. We're going to take another question. Our next one's from Rana, and Rana says, Somaiya, congratulations on your new book. And they said, when I write, I try to always pull in Arabic, Middle Eastern culture. I'm Arab. How do you balance integrating culture and making it accessible? Also, how do you research poems, poets, history, and the Arab Islamic world? It's hard.
Ooh, okay. In terms of making the culture accessible, don't worry about that. There were a lot of, like, I assume you're not agented. That's an assumption that I'm making. So you want to find an agent who like knows how to ask those questions. But also, like, one of the things that I kept in mind when I was writing Mirage and when I was writing Court of Lions is that readers can keep track of 1 million houses in Game of Thrones with people who look remarkably similar to one another. Like there's 2 Aegons in Game of Thrones, and no one had a problem like they always know which Aegon you're talking about, right? So like I would worry less. Really what you want to worry about is craft and like making sure that like the cultural elements that you're showcasing are necessary for plot, right? In which case like the reader is going to take context clues to be able to understand what's going on, right? And like a reader that doesn't understand like why you're kissing someone twice on the left cheek and once on the right or whatever, like whatever, right? Like that's sort of the approach that I had. And so there's a lot of things in Mirage and Court of Lions that like a non-Moroccan reader or a non-Arab reader or a non-Amazighi reader, just like they don't get it and they don't see it and they move on. But like all of the Maghariba who have read Mirage and Court of Lions have been like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that food is. I know what this is, et cetera, et cetera. So like I would worry way less about making it accessible and way more about like how you're using it in the plot and is it a context in which you're using it to that like the reader will understand what's happening versus like, do you just want to talk about this cultural element and take up page space? And then in terms of research, I was really lucky / cursed that I was at a university, so I had access to databases. So I would just like request things from the library. Unfortunately, a lot of those books are like really, really expensive. And so the first thing I would recommend is Abdullah al-Udari, I think that's his name, Classical Poems by Arab Women, I think is what it's called. And that's like $9 in paperback. And it's like it has the Arabic and the translation. Also New York University's Library of Arabic, I think it's what it's called. But if you type that into Google, like the actual press will come up, and they're doing this like amazing thing where they're translating all of these like obscure Arabic texts by like really, really respected Arabists whose methodology is really, really great. And it's one that I really recommend. Like that's where I got my edition of War Songs from. And there are a lot of white translators, but the head of the like collection talks about how they come to a consensus on translation. And it's a really like, you get like democratic process that I really respect as someone who's not an Arabist and doesn't have any qualifications to be evaluating how people translate poetry. But I always feel very strange about particular translators who really obviously are like coming from an Orientalist framework. And I think that this press does a really good job in trying to to deal with that in their translations. And then the other thing that I would do is like from these translators, scholars love when you reach out to them, and they love giving you their work for free, like any articles that they've written and stuff like that. And if you are at a university and you do have access to a database, you'll have specialized librarians at the library. Like that's what I did, the first thing that I did, because finding stuff about North Africa is hard, especially medieval North Africa. So I literally emailed the librarian and I was like, I can't find anything, help me. And there's like a North African Middle East during history librarian, and she was like, here are good places to start. And then you just mine the bibliographies for more and more stuff. Sorry, I feel like I was talking really, really fast.
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful for them as well. So next question is for all of you. Comes from Tasmia. Tasmia asks, what has been the biggest struggle for each of you as writers, and what tips do you have to young writers to overcome those struggles and obstacles?
I think we're all going to have very different answers. Who
would like to go first?
I feel like one thing that I continually forget when I start a book is that each book is its self-contained entity. So when I start to struggle on something that might have been easy for the last book, I completely fall apart. I'm like, I should know this now. I should be better than this. Why isn't this coming more easily to me? And it's very easy to forget to trust in the process. Like your creative intuition is going to guide you to a certain extent, and that the obstacles that you meet along the way are sort of, I think they're kind of like a sign that you're getting more ambitious, that the questions you're asking yourself are getting harder to answer. Like it doesn't have to be the end of the world every time something gets more challenging. And I tend to forget that every time. Have the meltdown, then realize it, then proceed.
I don't know. I don't know if we have such different struggles, because I have been thinking a lot lately about how things are getting harder as they go. They feel harder over time. And I think it's because what interests me is becoming more difficult to accomplish. And I always want to grow as a writer. So, things just get like, I put more obstacles in front of myself in order to see if I can get over them. So for me, one of the big struggles has been taking a little more time and trying to accomplish depth and breadth in my work instead of I don't know, I reread sections of Divergent recently and I still love that book, but it's just very fast, and I don't know if I knew at that time like how to really, like still don't know how the plumbing works in that world. Like I don't know if they have currency. I don't know anything about that whole city, and unfortunately that's what people want to know. And I'm like, I'm sorry, at that time, like that was not a priority of mine narratively, so I don't really know the answers, but you can bet your hindquarters that I know those answers about Chosen Ones. So just like letting myself really answer those questions for myself and do research, and then try to kind of comprehend the world around us so that I can comprehend how worlds work. That has been like one of the biggest struggles. And I would say for me, it's just having people in your life who ask you those kind of like hard questions at the development stage and at the early writing stage. Like I have an extremely good editor who pokes me into answering these things now, and friends who poke me also. So.
Somaiya?
Yeah, actually, I think, I think the gap between like what I want to accomplish and what I'm capable of is something I'm constantly trying to close, and then not actually managing to close it. Because I mean, like Courtney and Veronica, sort of I feel like ideally your ambitions grow with each book. Your ambitions grow with each book, but also like you read faster than you write, and so your ability to like the way that your taste grows and evolves, and the ability with which you're able to develop the craft to match that taste are just wildly misaligned in general, and it's really frustrating. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
But also importantly, not a reason to give up. Like I think that's just a fact of like craft and writing, is that like your skill level and your taste level are always going to be a little misaligned simply because you can read faster than you can write.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point to keep in mind if you're a writer and you're watching this, is that it's okay to feel like you can't make the image in your mind like appear in front of you. That's very normal.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing. We have time for one more last quick question. So for my last one, it's from Ashley. Ashley said, loved Court of Lions. What can we expect from you next? In the Daud literary universe, what are the key things you want readers to take away from your work?
Oh God. Okay, it's a two-prong. Thank you, Ashley. I feel like I know which Ashley it is. I have a novella that's coming out. I'm not really sure when, and I don't know how much I can talk about it. But it is a romance, and it's the thing that I thought that I didn't have to world build for, and now I have to world build for it, because that's just how it goes. And then what I want people to have fun in my universes. Like, I think I think people sometimes, when we were talking about books, we shy away from the idea that like storytelling's point is storytelling, i.e. entertainment. And that's often a priority with me. Like, if I'm not having fun writing something, then like oftentimes I'm just like, nobody's gonna have fun reading this. And so I do want you to have fun in my worlds, and I want to be able to see texts from my friends that are like, why would you do this to me? That brings me immense joy, because it means that I made you feel something. Yeah.
You sure did, so thank you. Veronica and Courtney, do you want to share what you're working on next as well?
I've got nothing really. I mean, I'm like working on a bunch of stuff, but right now,
Chosen Ones.
That is out. That's all I got.
My next book, The Project, is coming out on February 2nd, 2021, and it's about a girl who infiltrates a cult. And it was thoroughly researched.
So good.
Well, thank you for sharing. We always like to end on one last question. So if you all each want to share a book that you're reading now or something you really recommend that people can read during this time we're all quarantined.
Well, what I'm about to read after I finish the big brick of Midnight Sun, which I'm also excited about. But what I want to, because everyone's heard of Midnight Sun, but you should read Gideon the Ninth and then Hero,
Yes.
which is now out. Because they're so fun.
Yeah.
I just finished Francina Simone's Smash It. It's coming out in September 22nd, and it's about a girl who has like an F-it list, and she decides to join the school musical and just take control of her life, and it goes spectacularly awry, and it has like all these great relationships in them, and I think I shipped her with literally everyone, so by the time she had to make a choice, I was so knotted up and upset and excited, and it was perfect. It was very satisfying.
I just finished, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong. I think it's Guy Vaux's Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is a Tor.com novella. It's like 150. It's so good. It's so good. It's like a marvel both of storytelling and world building in like 100 pages. Like, I got to the end of it and was like, I don't know how she pulled that off, but it's incredible. Yeah, so I'm really excited for like both the sequel, and she has like a full-length novel coming out, I think, in 21.
Nice.
Yeah.
These are
It's a
all
Gatsby
great
retelling.
Is it?
Yeah.
Ooh. Nice.
These are all great books to look forward to. Thank you all so much. Thanks everyone for your questions and all your amazing contributions. And many thanks to Somaiya, Victoria, Veronica, Courtney, and for joining us this evening and sharing your words and insights. And of course, thank you everyone for viewing today and joining us. Don't forget, you can click on the link in the chat box. It will drop again in case you missed it. Get your own copy of Court of Lions or start from the beginning with Mirage if you haven't yet. All our copies again come with a signed book plate while supplies last. And also, of course, check out Veronica and Courtney's amazing books as well. Also, you can find out about more upcoming events on our website. You can also follow us, Children and Teen Department, on social media. We'll drop that handle in the chat box as well. And you can also watch our past events on our PNP YouTube page. as well as this one if you want to watch it again later. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I hope you all keep reading widely, expanding your world, and exploring new ones. Stay safe, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks so
you
much for having us.
Bye.
Bye.